Greetings, everyone. This is Dr. Ray Lindley. I'm the Executive Director of Array Global Accreditation. It's great to have you with us here today. And we are excited about this workshop that we're bringing to you today. This is our regular monthly workshop, and we're very, very pleased to have one of our Associate Directors, Dr. Mike Poe, who will be introducing the workshop in just a moment. So before that, let me reintroduce Dr. Jacob Francom, and he has a few words for us.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, around the world, we're excited that you're a part of our monthly workshop today. Last month, we had many people participate, and we're excited to keep providing this wonderful service free of charge with certificates for teachers and educators and administrators throughout the world. And before I get into some of these announcements here, I just wanted to make sure that people understand with the workshop at the very conclusion, when everything's done, that's when we put in the link for the post-workshop survey. And you have to fill out that correctly with the name, email address, and then we'll send off the certificate to you. We send it out usually Tuesday night, my time, which is Wednesday morning, your time. Some things that we want to make sure that you're aware of. These are also free, these Array Global academic competitions. Dr. Ray and I just finished the academic awards ceremony for the writing contest. That concluded. We had over 800 entries from around the world. The focus was on developing courage, recognizing courage in your life. And so we were really excited to see so many entries. We had our judges had a very difficult time going through and determining who were the winners. So with that concluding academic contest, we have a new contest, this performing arts contest, Making Melodies Music contest. And what we were just telling our students is that anyone can participate in it, any student, regardless of their talent level. If they can't play the piano, they can sing. If they can play the piano, let's hear them play the piano or the saxophone or any other piece of music that they can present. And we'd love to be able to hear that from them. And so we have 3 contests during the year: the writing contest, the performing arts contest, and then in the springtime, the science fair. That's always very popular. The music contest is something new that we're starting out. We usually do some kind of art in the wintertime, and this piece of art is the music. And so please get on to our website, arrayglobal.org, and look at our academic competitions and get your students to sign up. Again, it's free of charge. There's cash prizes, and we'd love to be able to show your students, recognize your students for the great work that they've done. Also, many of you are with schools that we accredit, and some of you are not with schools that we accredit, and we would love to work with your schools. We work with schools that are grades kindergarten through grade 12, so primary, middle, and high school. We accredit international schools if they're American, if they're Canadian, if they're Australian, if they're French. We also accredit national schools. So we will work with you if you teach in your whole schools in Arabic, or if it's in any other language. If it's a public or a national school, we will also work with you. Another thing we do is we accredit post-secondary vocational career schools. So schools that are for people who've graduated high school, and it's a non-degree school. So you can go and become a certified welder, or if you want to get some teacher training, we do a lot of teacher training certifications. And then another thing we do is what's growing, especially in a lot of countries where you're from, are distance-based programs. So if you have a K through 12 distance-based program, we'd love to come in and accredit it. And we do that all over Zoom. And we'd love to help you out in your school improvement process, because we believe accreditation is an improvement process for your school. And we directly want to affect the students and their performance. So please get in and look at our services. I've gone over these, I think, almost every time. Another one that we like to highlight is the Sister School program, where your school, and it's free to accredited schools, you can partner with a school in the United States. You can communicate with each other. Your teachers can communicate with their teachers. Your students can communicate with their students. You can come over and visit the school and be there for a week or two and see some of the sites in the United States, and they may even come over and visit your school. So We'd love to talk to you about the services that we provide. So please reach out to us. Again, if you want to be part of our sister school program, you do have to be an accredited school. And some of these other services, you do have to be an accredited school. Some of them are free for any school. So please get in, and we're just here to really help students and schools in their journey towards educating the best of our next generation. I think that's back to you, Dr. Ray.
Great. So thank you all. And it's great to see so many familiar faces. I think that it's important to say that today's workshop deals with an area of schools that we often might overlook, because we can talk a lot about a curriculum, we can talk a lot about assessment, about student behavior and so forth. But if we don't have the involvement of the community around us, we will be somewhat short-circuited by the efforts that we try to do. So we're thrilled to have Dr. Mike Poe with us. Dr. Poe is one of the associate directors, as I said earlier, for Array Global, and he will be presenting the workshop today. The presentation will be taped, and also the PowerPoint will be available at the end of the workshop if you should choose to do it. So, Dr. Mike, thank you for your work and time with us today, and the show is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Ray. It's always a pleasure to present to this group of folks, because they're always so appreciative. That always makes a speaker feel good at the end when people go, yeah, thank you very much. But anyway, so I'm going to start things out a little differently. If you'll go to the top of, check the link for the Developing Community Support for your school. If you folks will go to that, if you can't, you can go later. But I felt like I really wanted to have something that you could utilize without having to go back and watch the video later. And so here is a spreadsheet. It's a Google Sheet. You should have the link. Anybody that has the link should be able to get in here. And what I have done is I have set up several tabs. So here's classroom teachers. Here's some ideas about how to use classroom volunteers in classrooms, both elementary and secondary. You can see how I set this up. Then you would put your school in, your location, and then if you want to put contact information in, you're welcome to do so. And if you don't, that's okay too. But it will help people see, oh, here's something that other people have done. Because one of the things that's always interesting about educators is they want to know ideas that will solve their problems without them having to do anything to them. They want this magic potion that is going to solve whatever the problem is. Well, the reality is all of us have to adjust things to our local community and to our school. And so if you can get an idea and then go, oh, I could change that this way to make it fit in my school. And this sheet here, and we'll put it in the Array Global Educators Association page as well, allows you to not only see what other people have done, but also for you to put in your ideas so that people can use them as well. We are a community around the world. We are one community in terms of education, as far as I'm concerned, and we need to be sharing these kinds of things. So if even during the presentation, if you want to add ideas, you hear something, you go, oh, we've done this, or, oh, I'd like to do this, those kinds of things. You are welcome to put those in there, and you'll have access to that wherever you've got access to the internet. So I'm going to now go back to what would be our normal type of presentation in terms of our PowerPoint presentation. And we will get going. All right, the link, by the way, is right here for the workshop as well, so that you can see that without any problems there. Okay, so the first area is you have to decide where you want the support. What do you want people to do? How do you want people to perceive you? The reality is, if you don't make a plan on what you want to do, the likelihood is it's not ever going to get done, because you don't know where you're going, you don't know what steps to take, those kinds of things. So truly, you have to plan on what types of activities do you want in classrooms and teachers to have volunteers help, or for the community to know about. Same thing with activities, both in school and out of school. And there's even administrative things that you can do and utilize in terms of volunteers, but also in the community as well, to help not only recruit if you're a private school, but also to gain support from your community. Even if you are a private school, you are still located in a community and you're affecting that community some way. So you can either affect it positively and do lots of things, or you can just kind of potentially even be negative if you're not working with those kinds of things. So that's kind of where we're headed today. So let's talk a little bit about support for classrooms and teachers. And we're going to go through these sections, and then we're going to kind of bring it all together at the end. So there's lots of things that you can do with volunteers in the classrooms and for teachers. And by the way, virtually all of these that in the presentation today, I've done in my schools in one way or another. So it's not like I'm just kind of making things up as we go along. So volunteers can come in and help to organize and make special presentations, being topic-based. You could, if you wanted to have somebody come in and talk about the job that they have, or a hobby that they do, or something that they're interested in. Having those folks come in and support what you're doing in the classroom with information from the real world, as people would say sometimes, is an amazing benefit to the students, because sometimes your students, as you tell them things, and I had this happen with especially some of my college students, oh, you're just making that up. That didn't really happen, or those kinds of things. And when you bring people from the community in that talk about their experiences, their work experiences, what they've done, and so on, then the students start to see, oh, this is real. This is something I might be able to do later on down the road. If you do field trips, and I realize that not every school has the capability to do field trips, but if you do, they can provide assistance, not only in going along, but also in terms of planning the field trips and setting things up. Bulletin boards and hallway classroom displays, for a lot of secondary teachers, the bane of our existence was bulletin boards, having to have something up. And yet volunteers can help take care of those kinds of things very well. Elementary teachers tend to be way better at it than most of us secondary folk, quite honestly. But a great opportunity there. Setting up hallway displays that classroom teachers want to do. Most of my buildings had display cabinets. Again, this is the United States, but we had display cabinets, and I wanted teachers to put up student work in those. Well, a volunteer could have come in and done that, and we did do that at times. Maybe there's a special project that volunteers can help in terms of preparing special materials, but also in terms of, in secondary, if you've got special projects in being judges, doing some of those kinds of things. For example, with the music contest coming up, and I'm letting Jake and Dr. Jake and Dr. Ray know this right now. I play the stereo. I don't play any musical instruments. I am not a musical person, so I'm not a good judge in terms of the music contest. But anyway,
I don't know about that, Dr. Mike. I mean, you recognize what good music is. But I love your idea.
That may well be the case.
Yeah, I love your ideas of just finding different ways, just being creative to get parents and community members involved, whether it's judging, where it's field trips. I love that. And so many of the schools that we visit, they do field trips, and to have parents that can help and watch kids and interact and have good relationships, I think it's just so powerful.
Well,
and especially if you go on a field trip, go ahead, Ray, Dr. Ray.
I'm sorry. The other thing that I'm thinking, Dr. Mike, is when I was principal, I know that we use parents for these kinds of things that you suggested here, but imagine what that does for the parent who is asked to participate. Wow, we're doing this together. There's There's something about the attitude that the parents will have because they get to participate. And especially here in the United States right now, we've got some divided idea about how much involvement parents should have in school. Well, here's some great things that they can do.
Well, like let's use, for example, and this is a very common field trip in the United States, is to take a group of students, whatever age, and take them to a local zoo. Well, if you can recruit parent volunteers that have background in biology or those kinds of things, think about how much more they can add into the process. Plus, you're recognizing their specific capabilities and resources. So it's a win-win all the way around to be able to do those kinds of things.
But I like your idea too, Dr. Mike, of getting parents to be involved in helping select the field trips, because they often know the community even better than teachers do. And they could maybe even offer them to bring the students to their place of work, or other places that could be a very good educational program. And I don't want to just focus on field trips. There's so many other things that could be done.
No.
And I've seen it. We've seen it when we've gone into schools and you see this beautiful display or this mural, and the school says, yeah, these parents came in and did it. And it just reflects so perfectly the mission of the school, the focus of the school.
Right.
And it's so powerful to have them be involved in that process.
Yep. And we're gonna talk a little bit more about that later on as we move through the program, but it really is a win-win all the way around. Oh, by the way, while we're going through these things, if you have the capability to go in on the Google Sheet and start filling in ideas that you have now, or at least write them down someplace so that you can keep those. I'm one of those people, if I don't jot an idea down, the chances are 10 minutes and it's going to be gone. So it's one of the things that I do on a regular basis is write things down as I come across them.
Oh, Dr. Mike, I just had a message from Tony Crawford, and I think it's an important one. There needs to be clearance for parents, for anybody who is coming into the classroom. So don't neglect that clearance that's supposed to happen. Thanks,
absolutely. Tony. And I guess I'm so used to that clearance having to take place that I do forget about that, because that's just an automatic process that we have to use. So yes, absolutely. Do not skip your usual processes in terms of parent volunteers or people coming into the building and those kinds of things.
And Mike, do you want to talk about what that clearance might entail? Because there's some schools that might not have that.
Oh, sure. So one of the things that the clearance, and it will depend a little bit on whether you have parents that they will always be with a school employee, and that is basically making sure that they receive some training on what you can and can't do in schools around students and so on. Sometimes people forget those kinds of things. If you're going to have somebody that's going to be with students by themselves, you'll want to do some sort of a background check, however that's done in your community. You don't want to just say, yeah, come on in, no big deal. You need to check background, have them, you have some references that we can check, those kinds of things. Is it time consuming? It can be. And I'm even going to talk at the end on how to make it less time consuming to do those kinds of things in terms of the administration. So
I've got to add a chuckle. I've got to add a chuckle here, Dr. Mike, from Sasgar. She wrote about how they use this, and the parents went on field trips with them. And what she says at the end, the students were very happy and parents appreciated a lot. And they said, now we know how tired you get. I love that one.
Yeah, I absolutely. So then we take an area to look like activities in the school. So judging or organizing school-wide contests, school-wide presentations, assemblies. It's amazing how much information your parents or community members have about things that would be of service in your school. A lot of schools, high schools, use senior projects. And a great opportunity is for them community people to come in and be at least one of the judges on the panel for the senior projects. I know the schools that my children went to when they did their senior projects, about half of the team, the judging team, were parents that came in from the community. And they usually try to get parents that knew something about what the projects were about. So that was nice. They can also help organize those kinds of things to alleviate some of the drain on your administrators or your teachers. And community service projects, and we're going to talk a lot about that in a little bit, but they can organize, assist. They'll know what those kinds of projects really ought to be if they come directly from the community. Let me give you an interesting situation. I did a consultation with one of the middle schools in a nearby district, and when we got to looking at the demographics of the teachers, only one of the teachers, and there were 60 teachers in the building, only one of the teachers actually lived in that community. So they were missing out on tons of resources within the community because they didn't know anybody that lived there. They weren't familiar with the businesses. They didn't shop there. They didn't do any of those kinds of things. And so we did what was called a community walk that got the teachers out into the community to see what some of the resources were and so on. But if you bring people in from the community to help you with these kinds of things, they will have incredible resources that you might not have any idea about. We talked a little bit about this in terms of class or school trips, athletic activities. If you're doing those, oftentimes they can help set things up ahead of time. It's amazing what parents of athletes are willing to do to come in and get things ready for their kids to be able to perform in an athletic event and a music event for that matter. All of those kinds of things. And helping to assist or organize in after-school activities. Those are things that, again, it can help you not have to spend as much administrative time doing some of those kinds of things. And then we've got the administration area to take a look at. So you can use volunteers to actually organize the school volunteers. I did this in several of my schools where we had volunteers coming in. I got to know them. The ones that had some real leadership skills and wanted to be in a leadership position, I started to put them in charge of organizing which volunteers were coming in, the screening for them, doing all those kinds of. Now I still oversaw it overall, but the volunteers really took care of all of that. And a school newsletter, well, most newsletters are electronic now. I was doing paper ones. I didn't actually do any of them. I literally gave material I had a person that was interested in doing those kinds of things. And I gave them the material that needed to be there. They formatted it. They put it all together. They got it copied. They brought in volunteers to staple. I mean, the only thing I did is take it to the post office. Well, nowadays you get the same kind of thing, only now electronically. So you give, here's the resources I want to in this month's newsletter that goes out electronically, and they can put it together. They can format it. Then they can give it to whoever's in charge of your website for that to be put up, so that it just takes that time away that administrators oftentimes have to do, or teachers have to do as well. We've talked a little bit about the leads for community resources. If you live in the community, then you know the kinds of resources. But if you're kind of isolated away from the community, you don't necessarily know what's going on. For example, when I was teaching, I taught Idaho history, and we do a lot of gold mining in Idaho. And I wanted the kids to understand what it was like to pan for gold, which is literally you'd have a pan and dirt and you sluice the water around. And so I knew that one of our local feed stores would loan me a big trough. So I went and borrowed a 10-foot horse cattle watering trough, brought it to the school, put water in it, put in a bunch of dirt and rocks, and put in little lead pellets. And the kids went out every period and we panned for gold. The lead pellets were the gold. Panned for gold. But if I hadn't known that resource was available, it would have been very difficult to set that up. As soon as I was done with it, I cleaned it out, took it back to the feed store, and they said, "Hey, see you next year." So by knowing the community, I was able to know what some of the resources were. But your volunteers coming in will also have amazing resources. And there's often, there are very few schools that have too many people working in their office, especially clerical folks. Usually that's the area that kind of gets put down or it isn't hired because we can use the money other places. Well, there is lots of office work that volunteers could come in and do. Now, obviously, working with student records is not a good area for parent volunteers to work with, but other kinds of organizing kinds of things, copying, if you're able to do those kinds of things, ordering supplies, doing that kind of stuff. There's lots of things that volunteers could do, even from an administration standpoint. So Dr. Ray or Dr. Jake, could one of you check the Google Sheets and see if anybody is writing things in? I'd be interested to see some of the ideas that maybe they're putting in.
Yeah, I've been following it, and everyone is shy right now, Dr. Mike. So maybe what we could do is give everyone a chance to get in and just give them like 2 minutes.
Sure, that would be that, because I'm moving to a kind of a different piece right now. So this would be a great time that if you can go into the sheet and take a look at the ideas. I put some samples in there, but write down some ideas that you've got. If you've got now I realize that some of you are on your phone, you may not be able to do that, but if you've got the capability, let's take a couple of minutes. Those of you that need to do it in the comments in the chat, go ahead and put some comments in the chat right now about those as well.
Yeah, let's see who's going to be the one who's brave the most. And while they're doing that, it looks like Farouz had a good comment in there. I like it. I appreciate it. He says, I wonder if there are some potential cons of parent involvement in school projects. And I'd probably answer that saying, yeah, you just have to be careful with which projects you get them involved in and which people too.
Right. Well, for example, for the senior projects that my kids did, they actually used non-parent community people to be the judges because, well, you're a friend of my kids, so I'm going to give you a good grade, or I'm not going to, make you be responsible. Where if you get a community person that comes in that doesn't have any kids in the school at that point, then that's a great opportunity not only to show them what the school is doing, but also to get rid of they were biased because they know that student or something like that. So now that was a great comment.
Yeah, I like that. And I think when we talk about community involvement, it doesn't mean that the parents have to come in and teach a class or be part of the class, but they could give you ideas, give the teacher ideas on what they could do and just be involved in that way. Because some parents might not feel comfortable being around other kids or being in a group setting like that. And so just working with people and their strengths, I think, is so powerful. Yep. I was recently contacted by a community member and parent who is an artist, and they want to do some artwork for us, like some sculptures and some pretty big, nice stuff. And I thought, oh, this is a great way to get some people involved.
Yep.
Yeah, I think the resources are there. And again, I go back to the fact of what it does to the community person to be asked to come into a school. And one easy way to do it is, because we all want to talk about future careers for these students, even at the elementary grades, to invite a parent in once in a while to talk about his or her profession and what are the things we do. And just that simple does this tie, which is very helpful.
And there's so many positives to this. You just can't neglect it. You have to utilize this. It'll save you with your time. It'll get you excited. It'll build support among your parents for what you do. And I mean, it's just a powerful, powerful tool. And
and it also, quite honestly, for the private schools, it becomes a recruiting tool.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because parents want to be involved. They want to be involved. They want to know what's going on. And yeah.
Well, and and if people don't know about your school, when
Yeah.
they find out about it, they may go, "Oh, I would like my kids to go here."
Yeah. Yeah, and
So,
I like some of the comments that are being posted in the chat. Mr. Crawford wrote, each year I arranged with our local American Legion post to assemble a panel of judges to judge essays my students would write on the themes of patriotism. What a great way to build that community spirit too, especially focusing on patriotism. Wow.
yeah.
It's
And
awesome.
Well,
I just wish every parent represented by every school had a chance to read the 800 essays that
Yeah.
were
Yeah.
just submitted in our writing contest. All of the judges were so impressed with the quality. And I have an idea that many of their parents probably don't know what they wrote. They don't know the quality of what they wrote. I wish that every parent could read 800 essays and see the quality of education that is happening in our schools.
And maybe, Dr. Ray, with that, maybe some community leaders, some country leaders should read those essays. I mean, it really gives you something to ponder on with our current generation
Yep.
that's being raised. The gentleman, the young man who won the contest, I mean, his was a powerful, powerful essay. Go all the way down to like some of the kindergarten, first and second and third graders who won. Just their thinking of other people and the courage that they saw with other people. Just amazing to see.
yeah. One of the things about volunteers that at least in the United States, it's this way, but I'm giving my involvement around the world in terms of working with parents. I think parents are about the same. And at the elementary level, it's much easier to get volunteers to come in. At the secondary level,
Yeah.
oftentimes the students will tell the parents, "Oh, I don't want you to come in. You'll embarrass me." You know.
Yeah.
But my experience with that is that once parents at the secondary level start coming in and volunteering, and rarely do parents volunteer in their kids' classrooms, actual classrooms, when they're secondary. But it doesn't take long before the kids realize, "Oh, mom or dad's here. I can go ask them for, like, if there's something to buy at the school store or something like that, I can ask money from them right now and go buy something." And a lot of the parents are. So to give you an idea, when I went to Valley View Middle School, where I was a principal, we had one volunteer that came in about every other week for about an hour, and then only because she lived next door to our librarian, and that's what she, who she was helping out. And I asked some of my parents, I said, "How come none of you," because I put out things about volunteering, how come none of you volunteer? And one of the parents said, quite bluntly, "We've been told we're not supposed to." The past principal said, "I don't want you to come into the building." And I said, "Well, I got news for you. I want you to come in the building." And 2 years later, in 1 year, we had 4,000 hours of parent volunteer time.
So would you have them
So
read, Dr. Mike, to kids? Would they be part of the academic process and
at,
more than just being a
at
chaperone on a field trip?
Right. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
They would be volunteers that would come in at the elementary level. They would read, but I had 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, and so some of the 6th graders were struggling. So parents would come in and do that. They would listen to kids read. They would help the librarian. We had copy machines, and they would run copies for the teachers. They would the newsletter. I had a parent. We had a bell system in our school. It broke, and it was an older system, and I didn't know what to do. The kids went home and told the parents. One of my dads walked in and says, "I work for that company. I'll take care of it." He fixed it for free. So, I mean, all kinds of things that happen once you start letting people know that, yes, you are welcome. That's the key, is to communicate with them. So, well, I think we're going to move on.
Do you want me to read
to
some
the
of
next
the?
section.
Do you want me to read some of the
Oh,
entries?
yeah.
Yeah, so they're
Sure.
starting to add a few comments in there, and we see some in the chat box too. We have ideas of inviting parents who have specific background in science fields to come and talk to students. Great idea. It's one that's very similar. Invite a parent or a professional of a particular field to lecture in class. What a cool way to get kids excited to pull in an engineer, a chemist, a physicist, someone who's a welder, and talk about their job and what they do on a day-to-day basis. because so many students, there's
Mhm.
so many different types of jobs that people could choose from. I think, I don't think we can expose students to enough of the jobs and options that are out there.
Right.
Another
Well,
one
then finding
is,
out what
yeah,
it takes to get that job.
yeah, right, right. And how much a student might really like it. Another one is assign a project that involves a student and a parent or community member to accomplish the project. I like that. One class that I've seen is having students go and interview people in the community, older people in the community, or people with a specific type of job. And that's just another way to build that community camaraderie.
One of our local high schools around here for the last 15 years has done a veterans project every year. And it's a senior project that the students do in one of their English classes, actually. And they go out and they interview World War II veterans.
Wow.
And they record the interviews and they publish them. And obviously now they're finding it harder and harder to find those folks, but many of those stories would have been lost if those students hadn't gone out and gotten those. So yeah, absolutely. There is all kinds of things to do and that can help not only the school, but the community in general.
Yeah, and I like the idea that
Okay.
Amani posted about a career fair. Wow, that's a
Mhm.
great way to get everyone involved. And I also liked,
Yep.
I reposted what Sekalani wrote on Facebook. They're watching it on Facebook, and said that the community members are truly the owners of the school, and their involvement is very important for the growth of the school in all spheres,
Yep.
such as infrastructure and academics. I think that kind of summarizes everything that we're talking about.
That's exactly right.
That's awesome.
Exactly right. And so the next part we're moving into the idea that if you want support from your stakeholders in your community, you have to give them something to support. You have to communicate. You have to prove that you're worth supporting. And just because you're you're giving their students an education, there's more to supporting and more to the things that you do. But if the parents don't know about it, if the community doesn't know about it, then they're not going to give you a lot of support. Because they don't know. And one of the areas that I used a lot were community service projects. And they demonstrate the value of the school to the stakeholders and the community. And they advertise the school and recruit, quite honestly, in private, especially for private schools. But the idea that these students can go out and do something for the community, sometimes communities forget that their students are valuable. A personal situation with my kids, all three of my kids, especially when they were teenagers, I told them to go help in certain situations because I wanted adults to see teenagers doing something positive. And I remember one time we were at a boat ramp and this older gentleman was having trouble with his boat. And I looked at Robert and I said, go right now and you help him get that taken care of. Could I have done it? Absolutely, I could have done it. But I wanted an older gentleman. He was probably in his 60s, which isn't old anymore as far as I'm concerned, but nonetheless, he was very appreciative. He came up and talked to us and said, "What a great kid!" And I'm saying, "Yes, he is a great kid." Now I had to go I'd tell him to go do it, but he went and helped me. He helped him gladly. So we can utilize our students to help show our community people the positive kinds of things that our kids are doing in our schools, not just hearing about the negative things that happen in the community and so on. So community service projects there's all kinds of park and community area cleanups. Schools do park cleanup. We had at the high school I was at, we actually had our student body officers went to one of the local shopping centers, and because our kids were leaving trash, and they picked up trash in the parking lot for the store that the kids were going to. And the business owners came to me and said, "We can't believe they're doing it, number one, but thank you." So, and the students came up with that idea. So food or clothes drives for the needy. We do a lot of those in the United States, but there's lots of other areas. Just because we think we don't have very much, there's always somebody that has less. And we can support those people. We can raise funds for them. We can get food, clothes, those kinds of things. Participating in community activities. Almost every community has some sort of celebration. Holidays, parades, those kinds of things. Having the school, even if it's a private school, get involved in those community celebrations. It'll help out the kids. It'll help out the community. It does a lot of things to help people feel better about our schools. And then the community projects. One of the cues that we can take is from an organization called the Boy Scouts, and they have their Eagle Scout projects. I used Eagle Scout projects every year at my schools. They did something for our school, but your school could do those kind of projects, like help out in a park and not only just clean it up, but maybe raise money for some new equipment for a park, or to develop a paint the community, where people that need to have either a building painted or their houses or something done on the inside of their house, the students could organize those kinds of things. There's lots of ideas. You folks will have a zillion ideas, I am sure, about that. And the way to get those things done, because every teacher has way more to do than they can possibly get done. Same thing with the administrators. It's always nice to see Tony on here, because Tony understands exactly what I'm talking about in terms of the time crunch on administrators. But the volunteers that you recruit to come in and help with these projects, then that's also helping the school out in the community. Now, you still have to oversee it, but the reality is these volunteers are very capable individuals. They're adults. They've been around. They know things to do. And we sometimes think we get really insulated, and we think that we as educators are the ones that have most of the ideas. I got news for you. That's not true. The community members have some wonderful ideas and wonderful skills and talents. And we really need to step into that. Okay, I'm making sure I get down through my notes. And one of the keys to getting volunteers, we talked a little bit about this, is communication. First of all, letting people know that you actually want volunteers in your buildings, that you can use them, and that you have something for them to do. And that goes back to the very beginning in terms of making plans about how you're going to utilize volunteers. I made a real mistake one time. I had a gal come in and say, I'd like to volunteer. I hadn't really thought right then about what to have her do, but I had a project that I needed done. And it was, quite honestly, it was a time-consuming, somewhat boring project. But I said, I need to have all these files shredded. And she said, okay. And she did it for like 3 weeks. She came in every other day and spent about an hour shredding paper. And finally she came to me, she says, there's got to be something else for me to do. Just shredding paper is not what I want to do. I said, that's fine. And we did, we arranged something else, but I hadn't done my planning ahead of time in terms of how to use the volunteers. Partly, I mean, I hadn't gotten any. She was the first one that just came in and just said, hey, I'm here to help. So you have to know what to do, what you want them to do. That's your planning part, but you have to communicate to them what you want them to do. So if you just say, hey, we'd like to have volunteers in our schools, people just go, yeah, okay, so what? But if you say, we need to have a volunteer to work with our newsletter. We need to have volunteers that will come in and help our teachers in their classrooms. So you're giving a specific task, or at least a generalized task, then people can go, I can do that. But to just broadly say we need volunteers, you're probably not going to get a lot of very, very, very much reaction from those kinds of things. but communication happens differently in different communities. I'd kind of like to see in the chat rooms, or if people have yeah, the chat would probably be the best for a second or two, for a few minutes, I mean. How would you communicate with the people in your community? So if you'll
I think that's
do
a
some
good
of that in the
question.
chat.
I think that's a good question, Dr. Mike, because every country is a little bit different. Every school is a little bit different. And I think even getting parents involved in helping decide how to best communicate that way too is powerful. I'd like to, just point out, I know you mentioned about community service, and we have an Array Global Me and My Community Service Award, where students who do community service for 20 hours during the course of the entire school year, they get a recognition, they get a certificate, they get to be part of an award ceremony. And what a great way to get parents involved with that too. That might be something that you could implement right in your own school right away.
And I want to
Okay.
emphasize something else you said, Dr. Mike. And if a parent knows specifically what it is you need help, that thing that you need help. You mentioned shredding the files. That was a specific thing, and I agree. After a while, I say, "Wait a minute, let's have something else." But I think so many times we have these ideas that, we need more parents involved, but we don't say, "Here's what we need you to do. We need somebody to supervise the field trip. We need somebody to help in the lunchroom with making sure, whatever, the kids put their trays back. There're just a million little things that we're spending our time as educators doing. And I think there'd be parents who would be thrilled to be asked to help do something. So I really want to emphasize what you're saying. Specifics. What is it specifically you would like to have help?
Well, and one of the issues also could be cultural in some of the communities.
Yes.
For example, with some of the international students that came into our schools that I was at, when I would tell parents that we'd like to have them come in and volunteer, there was a number of times when the parents their eyes got real big and they said, "Parents come to the school? Well, we don't know as much as the teachers. Why would we do that?" And the reality is that in some places, the idea of communicating directly with the teachers, or thinking that bringing in ideas and so on has been kind of frowned on culturally. The teachers know what they're doing. You leave them alone. And I agree, they know what they're doing, but they can always utilize some help. And yet, we have to communicate that, especially if in your community that just hasn't been the case in the past. Surveys. All right. So that pretty much ends this part of the program. But what I'd like to do now is to open it up to some questions that you folks have. Give a few minutes to that, and I know Ray has Ray's thoughts at the end that we'll need to listen to as well. But let's take a look at some. I'm gonna stop sharing.
Yeah, and there's a good question from Mr. Tony Crawford. He's so outstanding in providing support and guidance in this too. So I love his feedback. He says, "Can you comment on a role for formal parent organizations such as PTA?" He said, "My own experience is to provide guidance rather than allow it to be open-ended." I think that's a great question. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and
let me interrupt just a sec. Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Mike. I just want to say that in my thought was long time ago, the PTA, Parents Teacher Association, was very, very vital to schools. And then it became PTSA, Parent Teacher Student Association. And the more that it got involved, the more administrative it got to be, and not dealing with issues that really help the schools. And PTAs are not really that popular in schools anymore, because they get away from this idea of parent involvement. And so I just want to say, and I'm glad Tony mentioned that, because PTA is a wonderful, whatever you call it, PTA, PTSA, it's a wonderful venue to get parents involved. But again, they have to know how can they help.
Right. Oh, absolutely. And in fact, it's interesting that Tony brought up PTA because I was actually a member of the state PTA board of directors for 14 years. And I was a member of the national PTA board of directors for 5 years.
Wow.
So yes, it's a wonderful organization. They provide what they really provide is the structure and those kinds of things. And then the schools, then the groups themselves then have to provide what is it that our school needs specifically. You know, if you're in a school that doesn't have a playground at all, and there's many of those, maybe that's what they need to get involved in. Or if there's those kinds of things, but it definitely needs to be very directive, and the administration and the teachers need to let the groups, the PTAs or whatever your parent organization is, know what are our needs. Again, it's that communication thing. We're sometimes afraid to just ask, you know, and of course we have to remember that just because we ask doesn't mean that we're going to get. But the idea that if we don't ask, you're never going to get. And so being willing to put yourself out there and say, well, this is something we could use. But yeah, having some sort of a formalized, you know, parent organization is definitely a benefit. And again, volunteers can help manage those and run those. Parent representatives for communication.
I like the focus on working with school administration too, and just making sure that parents feel comfortable of giving ideas, giving feedback, and doing it in a very maybe formalized, appropriate way, where you're seeking that feedback, where someone's not coming in and saying, you're doing this wrong, but they're actually coming in and saying, hey, have you ever thought about doing the car lineup this way, or releasing students this way? Or have you ever thought about going and doing this field trip and activity? I think that's a good avenue that parents and community members can feel like that they're part of that school, and they're able to help out that improvement initiative in that program.
Well, one of the schools that I worked with, literally one of the parents came in and said, you know, if you bring the cars in this way and have them go out this way, it will actually work better.
Yeah.
So again, the community person knew more about what was going on than the school people, because they knew the community.
Yeah, great.
Other questions?
Great feedback.
I was saying.
Now listen to what I'm going to say here. Ferris, you have your hand up. You have done. I apologize to him at the beginning of this, because I know the pronunciation of his name is Ferris and not Farouz. I like Farouz, but
and it's good to recognize, Dr. Ray, that it's 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning in China where he's at, and so he's a dedicated individual. He is an integral team member that we have. So Ferris,
hey man, you're unmuted already. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. Coming to you live all the way from the Far East. Okay, thank you very much for your insightful presentation, Dr. Mike. And my question is, since you were talking about really thought-provoking theme of community service and getting everyone on board and involved, you know, as someone who's been into such kind of community service project myself, as an initiator, as the founder of a volunteering movement, you know, at some point I had a hard time getting people convinced that you know, after all, we are doing for the good of the community, not for, you know, getting some personal incentives. But you know, people always sought some sort of monetary incentive or some material incentive. So I had really hard time, you know, getting them believe into, you know, continuing the project that we started off at some point. So my question is, how do you think these volunteering and community service projects and all those things that you mentioned could be sustainable, because you have to convince people that there are no monetary incentives, but they have to give their heart and soul into this. So this could be a challenge, because I've personally been through this kind of challenge, and I'm still somewhere in the middle of that challenge. I'm running International English Teachers Network, which is completely free of charge. But at some point, I myself need some kind of motivation to drive people forward.
Sure.
So this volunteering thing always have a problem of sustainability. What do you think?
And I think you're absolutely right. And part of the reason that the sustainability is a problem is because the person who starts it, who has the vision, eventually is going to get burned out. I mean, let's
Yes.
face it. And part of the process of the project really should be developing other leadership to come along behind. It's an interesting corollary with charter schools in the United States, especially the early charter schools. Once the founding person left the school often changed courses drastically or collapsed, because again, it was somebody who had the vision, but they didn't work at moving that vision into other people so that they have the same vision, so that things continue. It's one of the reasons, and I'll just use a personal one. I was the department chair at the university where I worked, and I stepped down as the department chair several years before I retired so that I could work with the new department chair to help them learn the things that I had learned without having to make the same stupid mistakes that I had made. And so that process, sometimes it just doesn't happen organically. We have to plan on, what is the process for developing new leadership and getting new blood in that has the same vision for whatever the project is. And the other thing is, there's some projects that have a lifetime. They will go for so long, and then they just, for whatever reason, they end. And that's okay. Sometimes for those of us who have been heavily involved in them, it's hard. It hurts us when a project ends. But the reality is, sometimes some projects just need to end, and then need to be replaced by a different project.
Let's see. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Dr. Ray, I suggest that we conclude with your words of wisdom.
Ray,
And then
let's go
then
ahead.
we-
Dr. Jake, do you have some announcements that we should go over first?
Yeah, I just want to conclude by making an announcement about next month's workshop. It's called Workplace Relationships, and it will be presented by Dr. Salam Noor, who is a colleague in the state of Oregon. And he's presented in the past, and he does an outstanding job. I'm looking forward to how we can really focus on the culture of the school, specifically among our colleagues. And I think this will be a perfect dovetail right into that next presentation. So put it on your calendar. Next third Saturday is January 20th at 9 p.m. Saudi Arabia time. And as soon as Dr. Ray's words of wisdom are concluded, which I don't think they will ever conclude, but he just keeps giving good words of wisdom. I'm not going to say he talks for a long time, but he always has some great words of wisdom. So after that, we will post the post-workshop survey. Please fill that out. And as soon as you fill that out, you'll get an email, or it'll pop up on your screen that there's a link for the PowerPoint. But also the PowerPoint link has been put in the chat. So thank you again, everyone who's participated. Please get onto our website, see some of the services that we provide, and see how we can best support you and your students in their improvement efforts. Dr. Ray.
Thank you. Two things that I would like to say. First is a quotation from Helen Keller. Those of you who don't recognize her name, she was blind and deaf, and early on she was led to believe, or people believe she could never amount to anything because she couldn't hear, she couldn't see. But she became a very great lady in her day. And she said this, she said, alone, we can do very little. Together, we can do so much. Think about that. Alone, we can do very little. Together, we can do so much. And finally, schools are for improving the lives of others. And it is the school's work that leaves your community better than you found it. It's your school's work that leaves your community better than you found it.
Thank you, Dr. Ray. I think those are words that we can live by until the next month when we have your words of wisdom. You can also follow us on YouTube, and Dr. Ray's words of wisdom are posted there and on our social media. So please now take a few moments and fill out the post-workshop survey. And if there are any problems, please let us know. In the meantime, Dr. Mike, I think there was a good question
Okay.
on Facebook.
Oh.
Sekalani said, the PTA is important for the strong school and for community linkages. However, they've become more administrative and hence seem to interfere with a smooth running school. Do you have any thoughts or ideas on how we can make sure that the PTA is not creating more work, but is actually a support? And I think you hit on that by being organized, but is there anything else?
Well, being organized is one, but part of it is making sure that you have projects or things for them to actually do. Because if you've got an organization and you've got a leadership group together, they're leaders. They want to do something. So if they don't have something to do, they're going to find something to do, which usually is more along the lines of meddling as opposed to actually being beneficial. So, and that's true of any group, quite honestly. So the idea of, okay, here's a list, pick out the things that you want to work on. So you keep them busy doing those kinds of things instead of busy interfering on what you're doing as administrators or teachers.
Yeah, and I like the idea, and this is what I have done as a school administrator, is when someone comes in who's interested, or at the beginning of the year when we have parents fill out all the registration forms that they have to, one part is how do you want to volunteer? And then sitting down with them and trying to figure out what exactly is going to be most effective for them. And because everyone's a little bit different, everyone has their own different strengths and weaknesses. So I think just trying to figure out and make something tailor-made for those parents or those community members, just powerful.
Right.
Yeah. Well, if anyone else has questions, please, you can raise your hand. We still have a lot of people online. If you're on Facebook with us, please post it in the chat. And we will address your questions, because there's been a lot of good dialogue, a lot of good thoughts and ideas on this. And it makes me reflect and want to make some changes in my school too.
And keep going back to that Google Sheet, because there'll be ideas there. And when you put ideas in, other people are going to benefit as well.
Yeah. And there have been some different thoughts in the Google Sheet too. One was actually focusing on ELL learners, English as a second language, and using them, putting them with a role model to help them focus on their English and help them with their homework. I thought that was a great idea too.
It was a great idea.
Yeah. Just practice, practice, practice when you're learning that second language, whatever that second or third, or for some people, fourth languages.
I struggle with English, so.
Well, we can find a volunteer. You can practice with them.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's great. And thank you, everybody, and the wonderful comments that we've received. And we hope that if you do get the PowerPoint and you review this, that you'll be able to come up with some other thoughts that weren't apparent to you at the time of the workshop. And feel free to let us know if there's any question or if there is any way we can help. So appreciate everything so much.
Yeah, and if we could stay on for just a few more minutes, Dr. Ray, if that's okay, just to make sure that everyone is getting the link and everyone's filling it out. We have a lot of people that have already done it, but I just want to make sure that we're not getting bombarded with emails and WhatsApp messages after this. So make sure you get on now, make sure you have your name in there correctly, and that you have your email address, or else it's gonna it's going to slow things down. It's always a pleasure, Mr. Crawford.
Yep. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, kind of jealous you're hanging out in Egypt like you are. It's probably nice and warm there, especially compared to your home state of Oregon.
We've had some record high temperatures here recently, and
Wow.
I have found myself overdressed, wearing a sweater along with my suit. It was unnecessary.
How warm?
So-
How warm is it there right now?
Well, in Fahrenheit degrees, it's the high temperatures for the day has been between 75 and 80, which is actually warm even by Egyptian standards
Yeah.
for this time of year.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, you wouldn't need a vest for that kind of weather.
No.
Yeah, yeah.
And in Ferris, it's -15. Wow. That's great. You're colder than we are. Yeah, but you're strong. You're right. Yeah. Oh, yeah, you can unmute yourself now.
Oh, I'm just wearing t-shirt.
Oh,
although
okay. I
it's
thought you were
pretty
showing your
cool
muscles.
outside.
I'm like, yeah, you are tough, man.
T-shirt.
But you're probably used to a little bit of cold.
Because I have AC on.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's pretty warm inside. So
Yeah, yeah.
and plus I have the floor heating.
Oh, that's nice. That's
Oh.
wonderful.
Sorry about that.
All right. Well, Dr. Ray, I think we have most everyone who's
Okay.
filled out the survey. I think we're ready to wrap things up. And again,
Thank you
Right.
again, everybody. And
great holidays.
and if you have holidays coming up,
Yeah.
have great ones. If you don't have
Yep.
holidays coming up, have a great
Too bad.
time. Too
Yeah.
bad.
See you next year.
Yeah. Thank
See you next
Take
year.
care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.